Hello everyone, I am Tessellating Hexagons, and the day before yesterday we were finally treated to a song that, well, personally, I've been rather interested to hear what Ireland has come up with for this year's Eurovision Song Contest, because they've been a country that I've sort of been keeping an eye on over the past couple of years, especially since I've started reviewing, because, well, they've been an interesting one, with their various highs and lows, mostly lows since I've been reviewing them, and it is funny because this is a country that was like one of the big powerhouses of the 90s, so have they returned to form? Well, let's take a look. Their song this year is Together, as performed by Ryan O'Shaughnessy, presented fully in English, music and lyrics by Ryan himself, plus Mark Caplice, and Laura Elizabeth Hughes, a team of writers from what RTE are referring to as the Nucleus, which I'll address that later on in the review because that's something that's definitely caught my attention. But first, let's talk about the actual song. So we'll begin with my first impressions, as always. And I think this song is kind of the victim of the principle that the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. I've seen maybe 2 reactions so far. Not 2 types of reactions, but literally 2 people reacting to this song. A third if you count my mother when I played her the song earlier today. And both of those comments that I've seen so far mentioned Germany's song in the same breath. Having listened to it for myself, I sort of see what's being said there. They are both songs about losing someone close to you in one way or another, and both are simple, a man and his guitar kind of compositions. Still, to put this song entirely in Germany's shadow is doing Ireland quite a bit of a disservice this year. In truth, this song fascinates me in a number of ways, because, for one, well, the story being told isn't quite as straightforward as it might seem on paper, or at least that's the impression that I got from my first listening anyway, but I'll expand on that in just a moment. For now, what else is there in this song that you might enjoy? For one thing, this is one of those songs where some of its magic just comes from how simple the overall presentation and composition is, and this year, out of any Eurovision year, people are more likely to appreciate that right out of the gate. This song isn't overproduced to the moon and back. It's not a bought and paid for stock soundtrack kind of beat. It's just a guy, a guitar, and a few other instruments to flesh it out, without going overboard, which really helps sell what this song is trying to convey, which is a viciously personal kind of story. Now, as for whether Ryan has experienced that for himself or not, I can't say, but the song tells a story in the most literal sense. Whereas some songs imply an extended narrative or have a message that's kind of abstract, the purpose of this song is to literally tell the tale of Ryan and his partner, and that narrative permanence allows it to be delivered with that much more emotion. So whether he's actually experienced it firsthand or not is kind of immaterial, because it's a song that allows the singer to perform it with conviction as if they've experienced it, so I could believe that Ryan has first-hand experienced this kind of breakup. So yeah, as it is, it sounds pretty sincere, which is good. Eurovision fans can usually smell fake emotion from many miles away, and if it's anything less than genuine, that would feel patronising and it would be derided accordingly, but it's not. This song passes the sincerity test. Well done, Ireland. But now the big thing with this song, in my mind, is that it's just ambiguous enough that you can read into the story almost what you want, and then build your own story out of it. It's almost like, not a choose-your-own-adventure kind of song, but it'll make more sense in just a moment when I finish explaining. The fact that you can interpret almost what you want from the story allows you to connect with it on a more personal level. It becomes more compelling because it suddenly becomes your story because you put some more thought into it. Like, you help tell the story in your own mind with your own thoughts, which then makes it much more your song than any song that spells out the full story for you. What I mean by that is, well, the base level assumption is that the singer's partner is cheating on them and then they break off the relationship on unpleasant terms. But the impression that I got on my first listening, and it could just be me, but hear me out because this might change how you look at this song. The impression that I got is that it's a song about someone's partner who has been diagnosed with either a mental or perhaps even a physical illness that they don't want the other person to find out about, or that they know that the other person, or that they fear that the other person won't be able to accommodate for, or they've been diagnosed with a terminal illness and they become increasingly detached from the relationship, not out of selfishness, but because they'd rather break things off with, in this case, Ryan, themselves, and make sure that Ryan moves on, rather than having death decide when that should happen for them. Which is very dark, I realise, but That's the impression that I got, especially like in the opening couple of lines. The, oh, you told me that it was going to be fine. And like that to me says that the other person in the relationship is keeping a secret, but it's not a secret that's that person's fault. Because if you cheat on someone, that is your fault. Like, it's not your partner's fault for you cheating. If you cheat on someone, you are at fault. But I feel as though the partner in this song, the problem that's troubling them isn't their own fault. I feel like it's like an illness of some kind that means that they're going to die, or that they're going to be very not able to be around for much longer in one way or another. So yeah, very dark, and that makes me seem all the more tactless for suggesting that now we move on to looking at what you might not like quite so much about this entry, but I had to get that out there. I feel as though this song can be interpreted multiple ways, and that's a strength. I do think, though, that in most people's eyes, this song's big asset of being simple and straightforward might be amongst its greatest weaknesses as well. In this instance, depending on your musical tastes, the composition here might come across as being too simplistic. It might not hold your attention, or you might listen to it, engage with it on a base level, but then urge for it to do more. Like, you might want it to get going, to do something more impressive, and it never does. You just want it to do something, anything, to justify you being more excited about this song, and then that never ends up happening. Yeah, sometimes less is more, but not always. And sometimes a dividing line there is personal perspective. It's up to you whether you think this song does enough or not. Also, the song does get rather repetitive across the 3 minutes. It doesn't help that the refrain is just 2 lines repeated twice, just to begin with, but then, towards the end of the song, repeating that repetition multiple times, it gets very repetitive. You would have thought that it would help deliver the message, like one of those tweets where someone just posts the same line over and over again for emphasis. But in practice, it does just come across as singing the same 2 lines over and over and over and over again, and that sort of makes them lose the original impact they'd had at the start of the song. Diegetically, within the narrative, it makes sense. It fits because, you know, Ryan's so heartbroken that he's just repeating this mantra of, oh, I thought we'd be together till we die, why aren't we, I'll always wonder why. It makes sense within the song, it's a coping mechanism. But in a song meant to entertain on a competitive level, people aren't interested in reading into it all that deeply. And for that matter, can we be sure that a song as simply delivered and as heartfelt as this will stand up on a Eurovision stage? I could see this looking and sounding lost on the night if the choreography and stage composition isn't good enough, and if it's flanked in the running order by 2 more imposing songs, whether in terms of energy or composition or message, then I could see this being forgotten tragically easily. The bottom line is, I'm not sure it does enough to stand out as it currently is, and that's a shame because this song is touching, in a way. And you know, I think that ought to be reflected in my scores out of 10. For my personal opinion, I think I'll cave into my feelings and give this a 9, albeit a relatively low 9, I think. Maybe it's just because, under the right circumstances, I could be an absolute sucker for stories that tug at your heartstrings, and this one has the added advantage of stimulating my creativity as a writer into filling in more of the story by myself, and so, as a result, I'm more invested into a narrative that it feels like I helped to create. Obviously I didn't, this is just my interpretation of it, but it still feels like I have more of a personal stake in this song than others, because I'm hearing my own interpretation of it, if that makes any sense. Well, whatever the reason is, I really do feel for Ryan in the case of the song's story. It may not be the strongest song, musically, but it's got me right in the feels, which some songs this year just tried and failed to do. Whether that connection will be made in the semi-finals, though, is another matter entirely and remains to be seen. So for the technical rating, I'll give this a 7. For its narrative and atmosphere, the song is very much a job well done. It's just that the arrangement and structure cause it to fall a little bit short in my estimation. It starts so promisingly, but by the end it's very easy to lose interest, simply by way of the repetition of an already repetitive refrain, which detracts from its own impact within the message it's trying to convey. For the people who enjoy this song, it does work well enough, but for a wider audience, I can imagine people losing interest and switching off a lot faster than they should. And this song is rather delicate, so I don't really know what they could do to fix that without shattering the song's current emotional credibility. You feel me? Now though, does this represent a step in the right direction for Ireland? Well, actually yes. Prior to this song being written, RTE assisted in the creation of a thing called The Nucleus, which is supposed to be like a concentrated hub for songwriters, like an intensive camp where people can just go to make music in a creative and reassuring environment, partially with a view to encouraging stronger domestic songwriting, and partly to encourage stronger songwriting for Eurovision. They literally made a dedicated space for trying to improve their Eurovision approach. and recognising that they needed this place in the first place, much less putting it together, is a step forwards for the Emerald Isle. Make good use of this over the next couple of years, and you might just end up being a force to be reckoned with once again. But as for Ireland's chances of qualifying in the present day though, as I said, my biggest concern here is that this might be drowned out by some of the ballsier songs of semi-final 1. Even if it does have the supposed advantage of being in the semi-final that the UK can vote in, it still has to contend with Greece, Finland, Cyprus, the Czech Republic, Switzerland, Estonia, Bulgaria and Belgium, just to name a few that would draw attention away from this one. For what it's worth, I think the juries will give this one at least a bit of love, and as it deserves, but I don't know if the public will be interested enough to make up enough of a difference to see Ryan into the final, especially in a semi-final as big as 19 countries. If he makes it, it will be very well deserved in my opinion, but it's far from a guaranteed thing at this present moment. For now, I have been and will continue to be Tessellating Hexagons, and to Ryan and the whole team, I wish you the very best of luck in Lisbon, because I want to see Ireland back in the final. I want to believe in you, and I'm not just saying that as your next door neighbour. So, good luck, and we'll see you in May.